Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and I'm taking care of business. Joining me today is Franco Terrazzano, who is the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Franco, I went to the pump last night to fill up my gas tank. It was
Oh
almost
boy.
empty, and oh my gosh, $1.56 a liter here in Calgary. And gas prices seem to be going crazy across the country. Vancouver is pushing towards the $2 a liter limit. Like, what the heck's going on?
Oh yeah. I mean, we're getting soaked here at the gas pumps, and these prices are crazy. They're sky high. But what might be even crazier than that is in a few weeks on April 1, you've got Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who is about to increase the federal carbon tax. How crazy is that? And we've already seen the federal carbon tax increase twice during the pandemic. This will be the third time during the pandemic that the tax on carbon has gone up. But look, we need relief at the pumps, and this is the exact opposite thing that Trudeau should be doing.
So in terms of the carbon tax, and I must admit, I'm not, I'm not a diligent consumer that looks at every little thing, on the receipt. Right? But like, what are we paying in taxation for a liter of gas?
Well, in Alberta, all of the taxes on the gas pumps, it's about 38 cents per liter, right? You've got the provincial fuel tax, you got the federal fuel tax, you got the federal carbon tax, and then you also have the federal sales tax that is added on top of all of those fuel taxes. So you're looking at about 38 cents per liter just in taxes. So both the federal government and Premier Jason Kenney could immediately provide tax relief, which would make life more affordable for Alberta drivers.
So and any idea of how much that's going to go up by?
Oh yeah. So right now, the federal carbon tax, it's just under 9 cents per liter. On April 1, it's going to go up to 11 cents per liter. But Mario, not only is it bad enough that the federal carbon tax is going up during the pandemic, but the Trudeau government wants to keep hiking the federal carbon tax. By 2030, the federal carbon tax will cost nearly 40 cents per liter. And I know I'm the bearer of bad news right now, but it gets worse. It gets worse because the Trudeau government wants to impose a second carbon tax, which would add another 11 cents per liter to the price of gas. So all in 2030, you're looking at about 50 cents per liter of gas just in carbon taxes.
So from the government's perspective, obviously, they're doing it for a number of reasons, right? And number one reason is they want to reduce the carbon footprint across the country. And what better way than to keep jacking up the gasoline prices that makes me, as a consumer, say, do I need to take my car to go there, or can I just walk, or can I take a bus or the LRT transit? That's the bottom line and all that, eh? That's what they're trying to do.
The problem is, though, as you know, living in Alberta, that's not an option for many people in Canada, right? Like, let's face the facts when we talk about Canada. And there's two things that we need to talk about. Number one is just the realities of Canada, right? We are a very big country. We have a lot of people who live in rural parts of the country. They just can't stop driving to work. They can't stop driving from town A to town B to see their families on Christmas. It's also a very cold country. We rely on natural gas. We rely on these types of fuel to heat our home. Right. Number two, though, Mario, is what we have to remember is the global context of this. Canada makes up 1.5% of global emissions. So a carbon tax on Canadians to punish us for driving our cars and heating our homes is going to do nothing for the global environment. And that's why the carbon tax really is all economic pain for Canadians without the environmental gain.
And this is just tax upon tax upon tax upon tax. I could go on. It's like that song, right? The little puppet, the lamb, the song that never ends. It goes on, my friend. This is the same thing with taxes, right? It's just never ending.
It's never ending. And we've talked about this before in another context, but what's so frustrating is that every problem that Canadians have, it seems like the so-called solution from these bureaucrats and politicians, just throw a tax on it, right? They want to help the environment. They hit us with a carbon tax. They want us to drive even fewer trucks. Well, they hit us with higher carbon taxes. Remember, they wanted to tax their way out of the pandemic in Quebec. Remember when Legault was talking about a vax tax? Yeah. But even sky high housing prices, we know that the federal government funded research to add a tax on Canadian homeowners, right? So it seems like the only thing these guys and gals can come up with is, just make them pay more taxes.
You know what, an interesting point there that you bring up, right? It's that, in major centers, the pain is not as much because then you have all the options that are available, right? In terms of transit and stuff like that. So, you could live in Toronto and not need a vehicle. And I know many people that don't, right? And, but it's where it hurts is when you get out of those major centers, the Vancouvers, the Torontos, Montreals, and people need their vehicles to drive around, right? And
that's absolutely right.
In this rural part of the country, and you're bear in mind that outside of a handful of cities, like major cities, that have those transportation networks that can support something like this, the rest of the country doesn't.
And it's hurting them. And it's really painful. Like, I'm just thinking about my own childhood. I grew up in small town Ontario, about an hour to an hour and a half outside of Toronto. Well, my mom worked always in the GTA, in the Toronto area. So she had to commute to work, right? She couldn't just stop driving to work. She couldn't just take transit from rural Ontario all the way to where she had to work. No, she had to fuel my family. We had to fuel up the car to get my mom to work. It would have been very, very painful to have higher and higher carbon taxes at that point. So we have to remember it's causing a lot of pain.
What's a trickle down effect? This is something that nobody really talks about because it's something that affects me as I put in my credit card and see how much I paid last night at the pump. But what's a trickle down effect for all these companies that have to use vehicles? They're going to bring that additional cost onto consumers in other ways, right?
Well, and I think that's why you sometimes hear that the carbon tax is a tax on everything, right? Because this tax will make its way into higher prices for other goods and services, because gasoline, natural gas, it's essential for work in Canada. But there's another type of trickle down cost, if you will, and that's the cost to jobs. The Fraser Institute estimates that a $170 per ton carbon tax, that's where it'll be in 2030, could lead to 180,000 fewer jobs in Canada. 180,000 fewer jobs in Canada. So, I mean, there's a lot of economic pain at the pumps, pain when you heat your homes, but then there's also going to be pain for people who end up losing their job.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Franco, for joining us as always.
Well, hey, pleasure was all mine. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Super. Franco Terrazzano, who is the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and this has been Taking Care of Business. Thanks for joining us today.